The dam is collapsing!
Get back! Move!
Oh my God, look at the water!
The first time I saw the Ether River, it was a heartbeat. Not just water moving over rock, but the pulse of the valley itself. You know that feeling when a sound just settles you, deep down where the anxiety lives? That's what the ceaseless cool rush gave me. I bought the land a little over a decade ago, 10 raw, sloped acres of pine and ancient cedar. It was technically the back end of the Ironwood Heights development, but my parcel was grandfathered in, untouched, wild. It wasn't about their manicured lawns or their petty, pastel-colored tyranny. And back then, I was still pretty raw myself. 2 years earlier, my son Aaron had drowned. A simple rafting trip, an improperly signed channel. A man-made death trap, really. The investigation was a disaster of buck passing and institutional shrugs. No one apologized. No one was held accountable. I'd spent my whole life as a river biologist, fighting for conservation, consulting on dam projects. And the river took him. Or more accurately, the people controlling the river took him. When I moved here, I didn't want neighbors. I didn't want the world. I wanted quiet, not silence. Silence is what you hear when the heart monitor flatlines. Quiet is the constant living hum of the river. And every spring, without fail, the skystone salmon returned. They'd fight their way upstream, battered and stubborn and beautiful, to spawn in the clean gravel beds right along my property line. I'd sit on my porch, drinking terrible coffee in the cold morning air, watching them fight. They reminded me of Aaron's last science project. It was about salmon migration, about the danger of blocking their spawning routes. He was only 11. I never ever imagined the HOA would touch this river. They had no jurisdiction, but as Ironwood Heights grew, new mansions, perfect little walking paths, the inevitable garden clubs, their ambitions started creeping beyond the sidewalks. It started small, a sugary letter about cooperative waterway enhancement. They claimed silt was creating an eyesore and they needed a decorative spillway for visual harmony. I tossed it. Then came the drone flyovers, a persistent little wasp buzzing my property line. I reported it. Nothing happened. The HOA president, Dana Thorne, invited me to a meeting. Dana, she was all manicured angles and gold leaf embossed stationery. The kind of person who could sanitize a crisis with a single practiced smile. I declined. I wasn't a member. I didn't want to be. She sent a handwritten note urging me to reconsider, for the good of the community. The truth was, I'd seen too many good places ruined by people who thought they were improving things, paving over history to make a decorative pond. It's always aesthetics and efficiency until the whole thing collapses. But nothing, not the grief, not the paranoia, prepared me for the Monday afternoon when I pulled into my driveway. I heard it from the road. The low, grinding growl of diesel, the clanking of steel against stone. When I crested the hill overlooking the river bend, I just froze. They were building a dam. Not a little wall, a full concrete arch already half-poured, cutting straight across the channel. Workers in bright orange vests, cement trucks idling. The river was already backing up. Sluggish, muddy pools where the current used to sing. I ran down the hill, kicking up dust and pine needles. I shoved past a worker. Who authorized this? A man with a clipboard, he was all tired ponytail and cheap vest, stepped forward. Mr. Garrison, we're with Red Iron Contracting. We have permits from the Ridgeview Estates HOA. No, you don't. Not for this. Not on my land, he frowned, flipping papers. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was staring at the water. The beautiful cold gravel beds were already submerged, drowning. Shut it down, I said. My voice was a dry, hollow rattle. He just shrugged. Any concerns, take it up with the HOA, sir. That night, I drove straight to the HOA's community center. A hideous stucco building with a fake waterfall out front, still gurgling even as the real river died. Dana Thorne sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed. Mr. Garrison, she said sweetly, you're not on the agenda. You damn the river, I growled, mud on my boots, sweat staining my collar. Without a federal assessment, without consulting me. That water is a protected migratory route. She held up a hand, a diamond winking in the fluorescence. We have legal clearance. The riverbank is under visual easement. We are enhancing the community's relationship with nature. You're killing it, I snapped. A dozen homeowners sat there sipping wine, smiling their neat, oblivious smiles. They didn't understand, or maybe they didn't care. I looked around that room, and for the first time in a decade, my sanctuary didn't feel safe. I walked out and stood in the parking lot. The air smelled like chlorine and wet pavement, and somewhere downstream I imagined the salmon circling, confused, blocked, just like Aaron had been. This time, I wouldn't let it go. The next morning, the dam stood firm, a skeletal arch of concrete, a scar across the current. I documented everything. Then I pulled out the drawer I hadn't touched in years. Old field notes, maps, and one photograph. Aaron, wet hair stuck to his forehead, grinning, holding a skystone salmon he caught right below that bend. I tucked the photo in my pocket and got to work. Calling the city was pointless. Unauthorized dam construction, I said. The woman on the other end perked up until I mentioned HOA. Then her voice went flat. Is it within HOA jurisdiction? No, I said. It crosses my private riparian property line. The bureaucracy was a slow-motion flood. 3 days later, I got the cease and desist from the HOA. Thick, gold leaf envelope. They were building a dam on a salmon-bearing river without public notice, and I was the one being threatened with civil litigation for slander. This wasn't just arrogance. It was a declaration of war. I went home and started digging. Visual Easement Authority. That was their loophole. A clause buried deep in their charter, granting them rights to maintain aesthetic continuity across all lots within sightline proximity to shared communal zones. They were damming a living river under the guise of neighborhood beautification. It was lunacy. Then came the chainsaws. I rushed out to see workers felling trees along the riverbank for Serenity Park benches. I shouted about state-protected fish habitat corridors. The worker just shrugged. Talked to the board. That night I emailed the Regional Fish and Wildlife Office. Attached every photo, every map overlay. But I didn't stop there. I called Dr. Hector Mendel, an old consulting colleague, now a senior biologist with no AA Fisheries. He answered after 2 rings. Garrison, is everything okay? No, I replied, my voice dry. And I think I found the most arrogant HOA in America. I told him everything. The dam, the easement abuse, the salmon that wouldn't make it. He listened, silent. They dammed a salmon river without a Section 7 review? He asked. Correct. Then they're screwed. Hector said he'd escalate it immediately. He was the kind of man who never forgot what rivers meant. But in the meantime, the dam stood. The water grew stiller. Algae bloomed. The river was losing its pulse 1 heartbeat at a time. I tried calling Dana once more. I left a message. This river was here long before Ironwood Heights, I said. It doesn't belong to you. She never called back. Instead, a new sign appeared. Future site of Ridgeview Serenity Park. A gift to our community. A gift. They didn't see the crime. They saw a feature. They had underestimated me. I wasn't just a grieving father. I was the river's witness, and soon I'd be its... I woke to the sound of hammering just after 5 a.m., rhythmic, industrial. Not a neighbor's project. They were working under cover of early morning darkness, reinforcing the structure fast. And then I saw the new trench, dug along the northern edge of the riverbank, inching onto my land. They were expanding the dam anchor. Planning for permanence, I stormed down the path. You're trespassing. This is private property. Not according to the HOA's assessment, the foreman flatly replied. We've got a timeline. If you've got a problem, call your lawyer. By late afternoon, I had 4 city department voicemails. Zoning deferred to environmental review. Environmental review said permits were being processed. The air smelled of wet cement. The distant roar of water was being redirected. The river wasn't just being dammed, it was being remade. That night, I opened a file on my computer. Aaron's River. It had pictures of him, essays he'd written, our field notes. I added every photo, every timeline, every HOA letter. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready. 2 days later, I received Hector's reply, a scanned letter from No A Fisheries addressed to the HOA. It stated clearly, the river was part of a federally recognized migratory route for the skystone salmon. Any construction altering that route without consultation was a violation of the ESA. The letter ended with a deadline. 10 business days to cease construction and initiate removal, or face federal investigation. Dana Thorne knocked on my door 2 days after that. No clipboard, no entourage, just a tight-lipped smile. I didn't open the door all the way, Mr. Garrison, she began, her tone clipped. We received your packet. We believe this is a misunderstanding. It's not. The board acted in good faith to improve community spaces. Yes, you did, I cut in. Because I told you and you ignored me. A long silence. Then, quietly, she said, "We'd like to propose a compromise." I laughed, loud, dry, and hard. "You want to negotiate with a federal agency? Read that letter again. The part where it says criminal liability." She didn't reply. I saw it then, not smugness, not control, just pure cold fear. At the next HOA meeting, the usual buzz was gone. Whispers fluttered like gnats. Dana, flanked by her 2 loyal board members, adjusted her microphone. "There has been recent concern regarding the Serenity Park project," she began, modulated, careful. "We are cooperating fully with authorities and have retained legal counsel." I raised my hand. "Mr. Garrison," she said, a polite, practiced smile stretched across her face. "This is not a public comment session. I'm not here to comment," I said. "Just a question." I stepped forward, slowly pulling out a printed copy of the No AA Cease Construction letter. I held it up so the whole room could see. "Did the board know," I asked clearly, "that building a dam on a federally protected salmon stream without environmental review is a felony?" Gasps. Startled intakes of breath from people who thought this was just a silly neighborhood tiff. Dana's face was composed, but a vein pulsed at her temple. "We were under the impression," she said slowly, "that the waterway in question did not qualify." "It's in the state's Salmonid Recovery Corridor Registry," I interrupted. "The maps are public. The biology is clear. You damned a live channel. Mr. Garrison, your behavior is becoming hostile." "I'm being factual. You killed the river," I said, my voice cracking. Not from anger, but from a grief heavier than anything. "And when the fish stopped coming, you called it progress." I turned and left. The truth was its own weapon now. By the end of the month, a petition to remove the entire HOA board had 173 signatures. They fought back, calling me a radical environmentalist. But nobody wanted to buy property with yellow caution tape fluttering across their new park. The tide was turning, but the salmon still hadn't returned. The dam had changed everything. The current was too slow, too warm. The gravel beds were buried beneath silt. By the second week of November, I knew. The dam hadn't just stopped them. It had erased their memory of this place. I called Hector again. I told him about the dead trout, the thermal spikes, the stagnation. I even sent him Aaron's old project binder, where my son mapped out this river's migration cycles in 6th grade, explaining why even small dams are a big problem. I cried when I scanned that last one, but it was a cry of purpose. Hector moved fast. He secured an emergency recommendation from his multi-agency task force. Within 48 hours, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approved an immediate dam removal. Emergency action for environmental protection. The HOA screamed about federal overreach. Dana called it eco-extremism. It didn't matter. The river was no longer theirs to define. 2 days later, the demolition rigs arrived. They drilled holes, set charges at precise intervals. It would be a controlled blast, not to destroy but to release, to let the water remember how to move. I stood outside the cordon with Hector on a cold, gray December morning. The HOA board was nowhere to be seen. Too late. Too obvious. The demolition lead called. "Ready, then?" A deep concussive thump rolled through the valley. The dam didn't shatter explosively. It sagged, crumpled inward as the charges ruptured its spine. The thick concrete folded like a tired beast, giving in to gravity. Water surged through the opening with a primal, desperate force, dark and wild, ripping away months of stagnation in a single, breathless rush. It was like watching a held breath finally exhale. There was no cheering, only the roar of the returning current. The river came alive. I just stood there, wet to the knees. I saw bubbles rising from the gravel, stones shifting, oxygen tumbling back into the bloodstream of the valley. Later that afternoon, I walked the banks. The transformation was already starting. The current cut deep and fast again. A kingfisher dove like a missile, and then around midday, I saw it. One glint, then another, far upstream. 2 skystone salmon. They broke the surface like ghosts rising from the past, tails slapping as they twisted forward. Scarred, thin, but fighting. I fell to my knees, just overwhelmed. They had come back. Despite everything, some ancient memory had survived. Aaron would have wept. I whispered his name just loud enough for the trees to carry. "You did it, kid." Because in a way he had. His love for these fish, his science project. His fire, that's what started this fight. The next day, photos of the returning salmon were on the front page. River freed. Salmon return within hours of dam removal. That headline felt biblical. Dana Thorne resigned. The HOA settled with the feds. Massive fines, restitution, and a court-mandated moratorium on all future development near waterways. They couldn't erase the truth. I'm still here. Every time I hear the current crash over those rocks, I think of Aaron, of what was taken, of what was reclaimed. The truest restoration wasn't in the water. It was in me. You know, you think of rivers as peaceful. But when that dam broke, when the earth finally let go of what the HOA had forced into it, it wasn't peace I heard. It was rage. It was roar. It was release. And it was beautiful. I touched the stone plaque they built near the bend sometimes. It reads, "Here the river was nearly silenced." But one voice, a father's voice, remembered its song. I kneel, place my palm on the soil, feel the pulse beneath. The river, the memory, the healing. And I whisper, just loud enough for the current to carry. I'm still listening. Call to action. What is the biggest, most absurd example of HOA overreach or bureaucracy you've ever witnessed? Do you think the HOA board members should face criminal charges for environmental destruction, even if they believed they were improving the community? Drop your stories and your take on where the line should be drawn between community control and personal freedom. Let me know in the comments below.